Howdy. Well, I'm back on the front porch, or back porch, whichever one you call it. And last time I wrote on my scoop loop, it was just left Squaw Valley Ranch and was headed to Canada, going from the Sagebrush Sea in the great big country to feed yards in Alberta. So I flew from Nevada up to Edmonton, and that was quite an experience. Garth Brooks concert happened to be on when I was flying into Alberta, Edmonton, and there's no rooms to be had or anything, and there's people everywhere. So I stayed a day in Edmonton. Then I went to a couple of feed yards up north in Barhead and some junction, and that was a real good experience. Horseback at one and on foot on the next. And then I traveled from there on down to the Lethbridge area and did 3 feed yards there. And that was, I hadn't been to Canada for probably 4 years. And the changes I've seen, well, I started going to Canada 15, 20 years ago in the feed yards and doing clinics up before that. And I just love the Canadian people and their style of stockmanship and the way they live. But the big changes I've seen with a lot of Alberta's feed yards is they're switching from a lot of cowboy outfits to more of a lot of people on foot, some people riding horseback, checking pens and taking cattle around, and some people on foot in a mix. And there's been a real change. The cowboy has kind of got out of the culture in the Alberta feed yards, not always, all of them. But there's a lot more stockmen that are coming in that they're wearing rubber boots up to their knees and shorts. And they're just not cowboy at all. And the reason that is, I believe, is the feed yards are small compared to a lot of them here in the States. 10 to 15,000 is kind of the normal, more or less. And they are very, very into cattle care and handling and all those things. So what they've done is their pens are smaller, their yards are smaller, and what they've done is they always have a bed pack in there because of the weather. Cold weather, they put a bed pack in there in the middle, and it creates heat and warmth and a place to go in the summer up high out of the flies. And they have windbreaks all around their feed pens. And now what they've started doing here as of late is putting fly ash down. It's RCC, it's a concrete kind of that they put in all their pens, and it really helps with cattle care. Their cattle don't have mud issues, they can clean them often, and the cattle care is just wonderful. But it makes it tough to be a horseback. It's like riding on ice all the time. So you really got to change the style of riding. And I just think a lot of the cowboy culture has kind of gone out of there and gone into maybe the ranching industry. And it's changed the whole dynamics of the cattle handlers. But it was great. And they all have real nice working systems and facilities and indoor facilities where they treat cattle and process cattle, and their loadout facilities are all real nice. A lot of Daniel's working systems, which work just great, but you have to work them a little different than some systems. A lot of people call them a bud box, but I don't. They're about 30 feet deep, and they've got an angled gate and a double alley, and people are using them real different. Someday we'll get into the whole. Hopefully I'll get my GoPro on and we'll go through how to work a Daniel's box versus a bud box. So there's quite a difference, and it'll work, but you got to do things a little different. So we're going to work on that someday. But I enjoyed the time, and it was great, and those folks are so tuned into cattle handling and cattle care and making a profit. And they look each other in the eye, and the owners know, and they're out in the middle of the pens, and it's a family. And some of our big corporate yards that I've been to in the States, it's a little different deal. Not everybody is a family. It's just a bunch of working crew that work hard and do their job. But it's different dynamics. So I like it. I like it a lot. And they're always improving, and they're always wanting to do better with their cattle handling and their cattle care. And they feed good cattle there. The big thing that's happening in Canada is a lot of the crossbreds, which are dairy beef crosses. And that's changed things a lot. Cattle, they don't drive very good, and they want to come to you rather than go away from you, so they've really had to change the way they work cattle. They get in some real small animals that are young and have never been driven, so they've got some challenges there that they have to change the way they work cattle, and it's been fun for me to see that process and come up with some ideas on how to work those cattle better. So after that, I had a very enjoyable week there. Went up with Zoetis and did some things, and then Coaldale Veterinary Clinic. So then I left there, and then I ended up going next to Green Acres in Cincinnati, Ohio. And that was, they're a real regenerative, kind of a foundation-funded project. And I went there to kind of do a demonstration on working cattle through a real nice Temple Grandin design system. They have a nice silencer chute, and they're really overbuilt for the 100 head of cattle that they have around there. But they really, we talked a lot about their grazing program and getting cattle to manage them on their grazing systems the best and how to get the best out of that. And then we did the demonstration in the pen with the Temple design system, which worked just fine. And that was a great experience, completely different than the Squaw Valley deal. Went from 300,000 acres to, 5-acre paddocks or less. And they move them daily or maybe every 3 days. And so that's a whole nother dynamics, and it's a new way of working cattle that works in that part of the world, just as well as it does out in Squaw Valley with the great big moves that they're trying to manage their pastures and their grass and the resources as well. Great people, great folks. I really enjoyed it, and I learned a lot and got to share a lot of ideas. From there, I went back to the tribe in Barnardale, Arkansas, and went back, and they're doing a grazing program, and they have no experience, and they're learning as they go, and they're in a terrible heat wave and drought, and it's really put a challenge on there. If it would have been the first year and they'd had plenty of grass and plenty of water and lots of moisture and not the heat that they normally have, I mean, it's a real heat wave there, as it is in all the Southwest, and they're having a lot of challenges with grass and water and those things. It's kind of changed the dynamics of what their grazing plan was. And I think I helped them there get some things on track. And the main thing we got to remember, I don't care if you're at Squaw Valley with 300,000 acres, in a feed yard in Lethbridge, Alberta, in the Alberta country, in Ohio or in Arkansas, cattle have to be on the game. And I don't care the feeding program, the grazing program, cattle have to be content in their environment, and they've got to be gaining weight. Whether you're trying to get them bred or get them fed, weight loss is a terrible thing, and that means our cattle are not content and don't have enough nutrients. And that's the big challenge we have to have with all these systems. So then I was home for just a little while, and I went back to Alberta and spent last week, I went to 4 days in the Lethbridge area, servicing more feed yards, 2 a day usually. And then I left there. We had a little feedlot challenge, and it wasn't really a feedlot challenge, it was a feedlot discussion. And we got a whole group, and we would work cattle in the pens and pull some cattle and do things. So it was a real good experience. Good hands, good stockmen, and a lot of kids that are just coming into the business that had no experience. And they've done a great job of getting those folks understanding cattle handling because of the principles that everybody is teaching and learning. And they're working it out just right. I went from the Lethbridge area, drove 5 hours, and went over to Saskatchewan. I went to Moose Jaw, Top Gun feeders, and they've got their yards all tore up. They're expanding, putting concrete in, and it was a pretty small yard, and had a nice ride with those folks, and they were horseback. I went from there down to Ceylon, and that was a real nice experience too. I've been there several times. New owners, new management, new pen riders, the whole deal. They got a new processing facility, which is a Daniel system, and they're working it just right. And we rode some pens and pulled some cattle, some crossbred cattle, the dairy crosses, and I pull them in a completely different way. So I'm learning lots about how to help people with these new situations they're in on the concrete and with these different kinds of cattle, and they were all real attentive, and we shared ideas, and I think it was a positive thing all the way around. I come home, I drove out of there, I left Ceylon Gap, which is the name of the feed yard there, and drove 6 hours home. Got home about 12:30 at night, then I had to get up and real early and I went yesterday and did the annual Lewis and Clark County fat sale, and my dad was there, and he sold for the first time in 5 years. We did the livestock auction. My brothers, Doug and Dan, and all their crew were there and helping, and it was a great experience, and I had a lot of fun. So I've had a lot of different cattle handling, cattle selling, cattle feeding experiences, and what I have kind of come to decide is they all work. It all works. And I'm sitting here on my porch. I'm looking out on the grass, and I've got cattle all around me. They're grazing in this green grass, and we're in pretty good shape here, moisture-wise, and we got lots of grass. Might not last too long, but we got her. But what I'm thinking about here today, is I'm just kind of regathering things on a Sunday afternoon, is how important livestock production is. And I'm very, very happy and proud that I'm in a industry, and I'm a part of the industry where everything is adding to the world. And I don't care if you're grazing cattle in Nevada or you're feeding cattle in Alberta, grazing cattle in Cincinnati, Ohio, or in Bonardale, Arkansas. We're all adding to the world. We're not taking away from it, we're adding. We're taking a product, we're taking sunshine, and we're either growing grass in the sagebrush and managing that, or we're growing crops in Alberta or Nebraska or wherever the big feed yards are, and we're converting that into animal protein, and we're taking that sunlight, putting it in the ground, taking it out of the ground, whether we graze it or harvest it, and whether we feed it in a bunk or we get cattle to graze out on the grass. Those of us in the livestock industry, we are adding to the world, and we're giving a positive thing from sunshine, grass, and the soil, and we're putting it back into society as good protein. And then the great thing is, and that's one of the great advantages of the concrete bunks, or the concrete pens, is when they clean their pens, they don't have any dirt. So all the things they clean, and they put, either they're composting or putting it back on the ground, it's pure nutrition that goes back in the ground. Just like our grazing animals are crapping and peeing and putting nutrition right back into the soil, we're doing the same thing in the feed yards. We're just doing it with a lot more machines, and we better have a lot more productivity and a lot more energy created to put it back, or it's a unbalance of energy. So just thinking about it here, walking around and taking some time to think, and I am so happy that I am involved with an industry that adds to the world rather than taking away. And you know, the Garth Gwilt concert, that's a great entertainment, and there's lots of energy spent and a lot of money spent and a lot of motel rooms and gas and everything. It added to a lot of people's enjoyment and entertainment, but did it really add to the world, or did it take away? And you know, so many people criticize the livestock industry or the whole agriculture all the way around. And the one thing, I don't care what style you're using, as long as you're adding to the world and making it better and not taking away but giving, now we're on the right track. And that's where I think we are in the world right now. We've got a lot of people and a lot of energy being used, and I just wonder if we're out of balance. But we in the livestock industry, and I'm proud to call myself a part of it, we're adding to it and not taking away. And that's real important to me, and it should be real important to you. So that's something to think about.